Today, it's a day of hectic diplomatic parleys in the national capital over India's position on Ukraine. So the Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov is here. He began his two-day visit today and has a slew of meetings. As per reports, the visit will focus on India's purchase of discounted Russian crude oil as well. This is the highest level of engagement between the Indian and Russian governments since Moscow invaded Ukraine on the 24th of Feb. The visit also coincides with the UK Foreign Secretary to India today, where UK leaders are believed to be persuading India to reduce strategic dependence on Russia. The US Deputy National Security Advisor is also in New Delhi ahead of the 2+2 talks. So fine balance there for India. Let me now go across to Meera Shankar, former Indian ambassador to the United States, Jayant Das Gupta, former ambassador and former permanent representative of India to the WTO, and Manoj Joshi, distinguished fellow ORF, for more on this story and to understand the dynamics really that Indian diplomats are possibly going through right now. Welcome to all of you. Ambassador Shankar, just your take right now, because the US is no longer being subtle. They're saying very clearly, and the words they use, the US Trade Secretary, was, "We are deeply disappointed." And they were responding to a report that India is finding options and alternatives to the SWIFT mechanism to be able to buy Russian crude. How will India respond to this, and how should India respond to this?
Look, I think the US would clearly like India to be more aligned with their policy with regard to Ukraine and Russia. But our perspectives on Russia differ with those of the US based on our own historical experience and our geopolitical environment. Russia has been a strategic partner of India for many, many years. And 60% of our defense equipment still comes from Russia. With sanctions and dollar payments no longer being, viable for Russia, if we are to buy defense equipment from Russia, and we do need to for spares and anything else, with Chinese troops deployed on our borders, we have to work out some alternative payment arrangements. It's not as though we would be able to stop all imports of defense or other materials from Russia. So I think this is something which is under discussion. I don't think there's any decision as yet from the government, but it's under discussion.
That's true. The question though remains that India needs Russian crude. We're also talking about buying Russian crude at a discount, $35 per barrel discount at pre-COVID prices, pre-war prices. We clearly need it. But it's becoming a situation which is now very delicate and very difficult. Ambassador Das Gupta, let me come to you on this. There was one statement being made that if China tomorrow invades India, Russia is not going to come to our aid. We need to align, etc., etc. So you have tension growing in the Quad. You have all of these powers, I would say, wooing India, landing up in New Delhi and hoping to get us on their side. Can India continue to maintain its neutral stance?
I think it is in India's interest to maintain its neutral stance. When the Russian-sponsored resolution at the UN was tabled on the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, India again abstained from voting to show that it is taking a neutral stance between the two sides. And the other point is that it has consistently been saying that there should be a negotiated settlement, that the two sides should come around and have negotiations. And that is exactly what has happened in Turkey. So that is consistent with our stand. The second point is, as you mentioned, the pressure will be there, relentless pressure will be there on India to cut off its relations or bring them down to a very, very low key with Russia in terms of trade, in terms of all other support that India has been providing to Russia. Diplomatically, abstention itself is a support. Now, that is something which we will not be able to, follow. For instance, if, our oil bill has been going up, petrol prices have become a sore point with the people and with the opposition also raising the issue. Inflation is going up in India. So if we get oil at a cheaper price, then I think it would be in our national interest to buy oil at cheaper price. After all, many of the Western European countries are still buying gas and oil, and the US is not finding any problem with that.
Yeah.
So it is, I think, of a piece with the issue of national interest.
No, absolutely. Now, the question today is not what should India's position be. India is taking the position that we find in our national interest. It's just becoming more and more difficult to, stick to it with all the pressure coming in. And Manoj Joshi, I want to come to you on the point of why India is such a coveted partner right now by both sides, so to speak. Is it because we would add legitimacy? If India were to sort of show the world that it's tilting towards Russia, it adds legitimacy to what they're doing. If India were to shun Russia, as the US is hoping for, it once again adds legitimacy to their stance. Is that why we have, in a sense, these different forces geopolitically, quote unquote, wooing India right now?
Absolutely. I think it's not just legitimacy. It's also a question of heft. If you look at the whole Indo-Pacific enterprise, the Quad or whatever it is, minus India, that Quad has no meaning. Meaning, after all, Japan, Australia are already allies of the US. So they shouldn't really be bothered about India, but they need India because if you talk of an Indo-Pacific strategy, minus India, that strategy has no real, as I said, heft. Now, legitimacy is one part of it because amongst third world countries, amongst the poorer countries in the world, India has a certain amount of credibility, and incorporating India into that, group of countries that can condemn Russia would be a very useful exercise. But that said, I would like to point out that we are not in a particularly comfortable position. I would say no matter what we've said, we've talked about sovereignty, integrity of states, and yet we are watching an invasion in front of us. We are watching another country, a UN Charter member, being invaded and being brutalized. So our position is a bit, questionable. But it's only questionable when you look at it from the point of view of values, norms, etc. But when you look at it through the hard lenses of national interest, we have actually no other option. We are taking this position on the issue of national interest. And today's world order, fortunately or unfortunately, works on the simple point of national interest. So everyone who's taking the stand, whether it's Russia, whether it's America, whether it's Australia, Japan, they're all looking at their national interests, and so are we.
But the question is that will the United States, other Quad members that are now making their displeasure more obvious on India's neutral position, will they move forward from just words? Ambassador Shankar, can we expect the pressure to increase from here on?
I think the pressure will be relentless. That's what I see, as long as the Ukraine crisis is there. And from both sides at some level, because for Russia, they see India as an important element in terms of their global strategy of preventing US dominance. So they need to have credible partners other than China. For America, they see India as an essential element of their policy of balancing China in Asia and the Indo-Pacific. So I think both sides, and with the world increasingly polarized over Ukraine, not just at the level of rhetoric, but at the level of international economic systems being torn apart by both sides, I think the pressures are going to increase on India. And we'll have to navigate it very skillfully and with a great deal of flexibility and on the basis of our own national interest.
How do we take this from here, Ambassador Dasgupta? So, for example, when we're talking with Quad members in the context of Quad, it's a different conversation. We're talking with Russia right now in the context of crude and defense deals, etc. But the elephant in the room is the Ukraine crisis and what position we're taking on it. Does India have that maneuverability and that room really to stick to our guns and say that, hey, we will decide issue by issue on what works for us best?
I think the whole point boils down to whether we take the moral high ground and, criticize our reliable allies who have stood by us for decades, or we look at the national interest. We look at, let's say, our defense supplies. We look at a kind of a bulwark against, let's say, China, for which we have also joined the Quad, to put it very bluntly. So in the Indo-Pacific, it is China which is the main threat with its aggressive posturing and actions. Now, we can't really afford to have Russia on our own side. So we have to make the best of it. Of course, the pressure would be there. But now I think we have, as Professor Joshi mentioned, got that heft that countries from both sides of the divide are wooing us, and we can take a neutral, and we have to, of course, navigate carefully, but we can remain where we are.
Ambassador Dasgupta, I understand that, and we seem to be reiterating the same point, but does it make sense for us? Because we at some point have to weigh what we're getting from Russia versus what the partnership with the West means. Is that scale sort of tilting away from Russia as sanctions continue to hit and weaken them?
You asked me this question. Well, President Putin has announced, I think today or yesterday, that 1 gram of gold will be 5,000 rubles. And all the gas and oil that Russia sells to other countries, including to Western Europe, will have to be paid for either in rubles or in gold. Now, this itself will be a sharp blow to the US dollar, because there is a possibility that many countries will shed their dollar holdings and buy gold and then pay the Russians. So it is not a one-way street which we are traveling down. Sanctions are there, but the Russians are also using the means that they have at their disposal. So I think both sides will have to be balanced. And finally, we also have to bear in mind that Ukraine has made very substantive offers to the Russians. Of course, the details are not very clear, but they have said that they will remain neutral. So maybe, and I hate to be, called a soothsayer or somebody who can predict the future, but possibly we will see a scaling down of hostilities between Russia and Ukraine during April, and perhaps a negotiated settlement. Of course, it will be an uneasy settlement, and then the cost of reconstruction, who bears that, etc., will all come in. So this war I don't think it is going to extend for 6 months or 1 year. So we have to my mind, navigate over the next 1 month.
So we have to wait it. We have to wait it out. But Manoj Joshi, even if we wait it out and we hope that in the next few months the war ends, both sides will remember whatever position we took, and that is the question, that tomorrow when we're in trouble, who stands by us? I'm going to ask you the same question. That is it still in our benefit to remain neutral and continue to trade with Russia, considering the kind of sanctions that are hitting them?
The real issue, the heart of the matter, is that India is an underperforming country. Meaning, had India lived up to its potential, had we maintained that double-digit growth that we had just entered in Manmohan Singh's period, it would have been a different story. But today, we are in, our economy is kind of fairly indifferent. It's not doing particularly well. That has its impact on our defense and security spending, meaning our defense budget has been under acute strain for the past 5 years. You see, at the bottom line is something called comprehensive national power. The comprehensive national power of India, the gap between the CNP of India and the CNP of China is widening. And when it is widening, there is one country which is willing to, or saying that it is going to support us, which is the United States. So now you have to take your choice. Meaning you want to remain neutral, you want to be non-aligned, fine. But you get into trouble. And as you know, the Ladakh 2020 crisis, the US backed us. And mind you, now it has been revealed that the US backed us and we requested the US not to broadcast that fact. Okay? So at the end of the day, we depend on the US in our confrontation with China. So you may say that the US needs us for its Indo-Pacific policy, but let me assure you, we equally need the United States geopolitically in our own region. And as I said, this gap is widening. There is nothing that is being done, no matter what boasts you may hear from the government, from government agencies. They will say we are the greatest #1 national power. We are becoming this, we are that. At the end of the day, we are standing still at where we are, and the Chinese are gaining. So that's the heart of the matter out here.
So it's going to be an interesting couple of days to watch. A lot of news right now around foreign affairs and international relations that we've been covering on the show as well. There is a threat to the government right now in Pakistan, Sri Lanka going through its worst economic crisis, and some lessons there perhaps on how that economy handled COVID and the Ukraine crisis. But for India, the focus right now is on what works for its best. We are, perhaps some would say, in an enviable position where all of these different groupings want India on their side, while we're on our side. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on the first discussion this evening.